everyone, and welcome again to Revenue Insights. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Michael Dalley, who's the CRO at Aerial Vantage. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you very, very much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Looking forward to getting all of your insights. So let's jump straight in. Perhaps you could start just with a brief introduction, talk us a little bit through your current role, and then kind of how you got there.
Yeah, currently I run all go-to-market operations for Aerial Vantage, a subsidiary and actually a spin-out of Mosaic ATM. We live in the agricultural supply chain, as well as working with federal and state agencies to capture non-diluted funding for things such as environmental waste mitigation for fertilizer runoff, or methane plumes, or crop yield forecasts for state agencies. As well as up and down big food, where supply chain officers that are looking to optimize and lean out their supply chain look to a more accurate crop yield forecast. So we capture that imagery, we process it, and then it ends up living in a shrink wrap SaaS offering called Accelerate, which is an AI machine learning and computer vision platform. Once you capture the flight ops once, you get to train and reuse the models over and over and over again. So a more accurate crop yield forecast is critical to manage the supply chain.
Perhaps you can just to set the scene for everyone listening in, give us a rough understanding of the size of the business.
So we're roughly 6.8 million annual recurring revenue. We're EBIT positive at the moment and growing rapidly. So it's high growth, fast scale, and a healthy business.
Very good. And how many team members are you responsible for in the kind of front office?
My have 6 direct reports currently.
Okay, that's great. Well, I'm sure a lot of the people watching or listening in are going to relate to that. We're all running businesses of a similar size, so that's really helpful to understand. So perhaps you could kind of give us an understanding of kind of how you got to being the CRO of this business. What was your history that got us there?
Yeah, so I joined Aerial Vantage actually as an advisor for an incubator, and advised the company while I was in my previous role. And I had grandiose visions of retirement post Denim acquisition by Capacity. And I thought that was going to work out, and things sometimes don't work out the way that you want them to. So I ended up taking on a role with Aerial Vantage, and I started as their chief executive officer. I replaced a gentleman named Tom Davis, a 36-year veteran of NASA, who became my chief operating officer, and joined the company where we were thinking that we were going to be in aerial capture. We're going to have the largest unmanned aircraft squadron-based fleet of drones in the world. Then we realized that's really expensive, and that we should think of how we're going to leverage the data, right, with the customers. Because it doesn't matter how you capture data, it's what you do with it, and then gleaning any kind of meaningful insights from that data to make better choices, right? And great, we've got these pretty pictures of a field, right? Great, we're capturing IoT data from, say, a corn stalk that's going to measure soil moisture. Great. Who's going to leverage that data to make choices that are going to move the needle for the business, and why is it investable? So I had to create the model and defend the model as we went out and raised money. So the first 8 months of my journey at Aerial Vantage was a roadshow, and everybody knows what raising money was like in 2023. So it was brutal, just absolutely brutal. In defending your model, it's just a critical element. So I'm grateful that I had my time as CEO when I joined. In the fall of 2023, I had elected to move down into a CRO to bolster our revenue story for additional funding and a potential acquirer, and stayed in that lane as we scaled, and realized that that's really where I like to live my life, and my career is having go-to-market responsibilities, all-encompassing go-to-market responsibilities, product marketing, field marketing, overall marketing, as well as revenue. But the other element of it, the balance sheet side of things, and having to make those tough choices, is it's cut for a certain cloth, and I'm not in that fabric. I just it's not a desire of me to be in that role.
No, I can imagine. Well, look, I mean, looking at your background, you've spent over 20 years in sales leadership roles. So talk us a little bit through what you've seen change and this kind of drive towards being much more data driven. When did you see that really kind of become prominent? And I know you talked a little bit about in the past about Challenger and Medic as well. So perhaps you can kind of talk us through that journey.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think we're always in some type of early adopter stage with whatever sort of technologies that's making headlines. Obviously, the one that's been making headlines for the last 18 months is AI, right? Prior to that, it was things like cyber, right? And that was huge, right? And then you look at the analytics wave. I've caught a few waves in my career. So really early on, I caught a wave where we would knock on doors at job shops in Detroit and see who was hand cranking a CNC lathe and say, "Hey, you've heard of numerical controls, right? We can automate this." Well, you're going to take away my job. So there's always an early adopter phase to every wave. If you get in early, it's a tougher journey. It's a much more rewarding journey. And you get those early adopters, those founder deals, or you get, "Hey, I'm going to take a risk on this. It's a new technology, but we want to be ahead of our competition." Back then, technology sort of drove the sale, right? And it, really tight process wasn't necessary. My first 8 years of selling, to be really honest, I winged it, right? I don't date my LinkedIn back to 1994, but I was with a company called QBS Software for 8 years, right? And I was 100% commission for the first 6. So it was different. There was different athletes back then. I think we probably had a little bit thicker skin back then, so we could take it. And it was different. So when I joined PTC, that was sort of my first indoctrination with true corporate selling. And I walked into a process. I walked into Medic, a methodology, because I was no longer selling a point solution. I was no longer selling manufacturing execution or ERP or inventory management. I was selling Windchill. I was selling, Pro Engineer. These are things that span different departments, different cast of characters. It took a lot more constituents to make a deal. Then 2008 happened, right? So the big change used to be that at the end of a quarter, you could always go to a friend or family and make your number, right? It was always somebody out there that you knew that could get you over the hump, right? Then came 2008, and then came you have to have a massive cast of characters and a constituency buy to get anything done, right? There was no more single threading a deal. So process was mandatory. Like, you had to ingrain your process. You had to go in and take a position. You had to teach, tailor, and take control of a deal, right? The mantra of the challenger, right? And on the back end of that is, how do you measure the integrity of your business? How can you forecast a deal and sleep at night? And more importantly, have your CFO or your sales leader sleep at night? And that's Medic. That's where Medic came in, right? And my Medic journey started at PTC with Mr. Napoli, introducing it to the sales team globally. And Dick Harrison enforced it, like he should have, right? He enforced it. So it was no funning around at PTC. It was a contact sport working at PTC. Everybody that's ever been there will tell you the same thing. So at every sort of technology genesis, you're going to get away with some early deals, right? Especially for post-seed or Series A, you're going to get away with some founder deals. And you may be able to wing it for a bit. But then comes, hey, what are our input costs? How do we measure success? Is it activity driven? Is it deal driven? Is it top line revenue? How are we measuring things? And that creates tons and tons of data, right? So what do we do with it? Like, how can we make use of it in our CRM, or how can we make use of it in our Tableau dashboard, or our Click dashboard, or whatever your poison is as far as BI is concerned. But it's going to live somewhere. It's going to live in a dashboard, right? And somebody's going to have to decision against that. So how do we get it there quick? How do we get it there clean? How do we make sure that data has integrity? Critical. And it becomes critical. And now we're in a very tough macroeconomic environment. The toughest I've seen in my 28-year career. This is the toughest. Right now, we're living in it. And it's because of the cost of money. It's because of the cost of money. Money costs money. If I can park my money somewhere for 7.8% and I'm a fiduciary for a large private fund and I'm managing angel money, why would I put it at risk with a highly leveraged, hey, you got growth. Great. Is it profitable growth? That's the difference now. Now you're going to separate the A players from B players from the C players. And the only way you can do that, you can make an average player much better. I'd rather have an average player because of the work ethic than a lone wolf, right? Lone wolves aren't making it now. They're just not. Used to go willy-nilly. If you were a great rep, I'd say, I don't care if you're on the golf. I don't care what you do. Just make your number for me. Right?
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. So you saw kind of a big change in 2008 when we were entering some more tough times. And at that point, because of that, you saw things like Medic coming in as a real kind of a much more data-driven approach to the way we qualify our customers that are in the sales process. Yeah. And then we saw some more good times, right? And again, it was easy.
Analytics boom. That was the BI boom. That was the BI boom, right? And guys like Brian McCarthy, who's the CRO over at Rubrik now, he caught that boom, right? And I worked for him. And he became president of Click at 37 years old. Now he's doing really well. To say the least, he's doing really well. And of course, they just went public. So I've also had the luxury of working for some of the greatest leaders on earth. Guys like Eric Holt, who's still running Content Squared, and he took T-Leap to exit with IBM. And I had the luxury of being with leaders that took me to task. Like, it was all about, obviously it's always a pipeline conversation. At the end of every conversation is a pipeline conversation, but can I trust the pipeline? And then how do we measure where we're stuck? Like, we got good opportunities coming at the top of the funnel. We're getting here and we have stage stall. Why? Like, are we single threaded? Is there a detractor that we're unaware of? Is there a competitor that we're unaware of? The data's out there now today to collate. It has been for some time, but a lot of organizations, it's always a data problem, right? At the end of the day is, okay, what do we collect? How do we ensure the integrity of it and the accuracy of it? And then how do we push it downstream through the decision tree, right? Within an organization, so we can trust it. I mean, raising money at Aerial Vantage taught me a lot about forecasting accuracy and how critically important it is.
No, look, we're talking the same language. We play in this space of revenue intelligence, and there's a lot of players that have got different point solutions. And frankly, it's not the hardest thing in the world to build some pretty dashboards that show you what your forecast looks like. The challenge is the raw data underneath it. And actually, where we've kind of focused a lot of our energies is really the boring piece of fixing that dirty data in CRM and bringing it together. You're absolutely right. The data's there. It's just in the wrong place. More often than not, there's a lot of kind of activity data and relationship data sitting in things like mailboxes and calendars and phone systems. And the problem is that that's not easily readable. And it needs to kind of be distilled down and made easy. And I suppose the other thing we've noticed is that salespeople, by definition, are not very good at admin. And there's almost a direct correlation between how well they sell and how bad they are at their admin. And I think that the big difference is that we now live in a world where AI can pick up all of that admin for us. And we can use this kind of limited capacity for learning to not teach them admin, but actually focus on things like objection handling and business case building and things like qualification and so on. And so I think I think we are going through another revolution at the moment.
I would agree, and I would see an attitudinal lift as well with taking that off the plate of a rep, because that's their biggest complaint is CRM hygiene. And if you're able to take that away, I think you're going to see a spike in morale, like on your sales team, because it's a constant weekly battle of update your deal, update your deal, update your deal, update your deal. It's like a constant. If I don't see next steps and I don't see notes that I can understand, right? And you need to, as you move, there's technologies available, and maybe yours even does this, where within Medic, you're embedded within HubSpot, and in order to stage advance, you have to have certain deliverables within that stage. So whether it's discovery, demo, proof of concept, whatever your funnel looks like, it force feeds it. It's like, we're not going to advance this deal until you provide the deliverables to stage gate it. So, automating that, I think, is pretty earth shattering. Rather, I mean, it's gonna optimize the reps' time as well during their days, so they can get back to what they need to be doing, which is pipeline generation.
No, I agree. I think one of the other things we've noticed is that this generation want to understand why they're being asked to do something. So in the past, when you and I were coming up, we were told what to do and we get our heads down and get on with it. Now they want to understand.
I started my career in the military. So yeah. I was stationed in East Anglia at RAF Lakenheath. Yeah, I started my career in the Air Force. So there was no negotiating with leadership.
You just do what you're told, right? That's where I grew up. But now what we find is that, if you and I might know that the more multi-threaded you are on opportunity, the more likely you are to win the deal. But when you show the sales team, look, guys, here's a picture, right? When we've got 3 stakeholders involved in our sales process, we win, 15% of the deals. But when we've got 6 stakeholders, we win 40% of the deals. Now, suddenly the picture suddenly the penny drops. Now, once you've shown them the data in a picture format, suddenly you'll find 3 months later, instead of having to beat them over the head with it, suddenly they almost by default, they'll have 6 stakeholders involved in the sales process. So I think that I've heard a lot of people talk about how this generation might be lost and, they're not necessarily they're not enjoying sales and so on. I just think we're not necessarily talking to them in the right language. And I think they love the badges and the certificates and the win and the green thumbs up to say congratulations, you qualified this customer well enough to lead discovery. It's like it changes people. They seem to really enjoy that kind of these kind of micro rewards as they go.
You sort of hit a bell with me. I ran Gainfully's go-to-market operation, and I had a young gentleman, Generation Z. His name's Jackson Rodriguez. Very, very talented kid. And he ran growth. He ran my growth charter at Gainfully, and he ran it well. I didn't understand anything he said. He was speaking a completely different language than me all the time. And he had this, he'd be okay going on Zoom in his shorts, drinking like a fizzy drink, like at 2 p.m. He was completely okay doing that and thinking that it was okay. He did such a fantastic job that I sort of just left him operate. But I do feel that I could have gotten more for him, like in career growth, if I would have known sort of how to deal with him. Now, fortunately, we led Gainfully to exit with our identity management offering to Agents Inc. in Denver, and then the other half to an agency in Michigan. So fortunately, that worked out well. But I completely get what you're saying, like about that. And what I like about what you just said too is the ability to course correct fast. Like I'm a big believer in failing fast. Like I'm not going to fault you for making a decision. Make a decision and run with it, right? And then we'll measure it and see what worked, what didn't work. Then we'll course correct it. But do that quickly. You can't fail on June 30th, right? You have to fail on June 8th. And then we've got plenty of time, right, to course correct and right the ship and reconvert that opportunity that you said was a deal into an actual deal. So but I got some Generation Zs that I work with, and I don't think they're lazy. I think I'm just old.
It's our job to change the way we're managing people.
Yeah, I'm just in the way.
I agree with everything you said. That we know that the best sales teams in the world are still not going to win more than 30, 35, 40% of the opportunities that they're working on, right? So what's really interesting, we did our weekly benchmark report recently where we analyzed 4.2 million opportunities. And what we spent a lot of time, where I've become really kind of obsessed recently, is looking at the delta between what the top performers are doing differently to everybody else in the sales team. And what was really fascinating is the level of coverage the top performers need to hit quota versus everybody else. And I had this conversation with another sales leader recently where they were really frustrated because the top performers didn't have as much coverage, but the truth is they didn't need as much. And one of the really interesting takeaways was the top performers are closing loss 30% of their opportunities at that discovery stage. They are being very disciplined about going, no, you might qualify 80% through, but actually that 20% that doesn't hit the mark, you don't have a budget, or we don't have what the buying committee is, or there's no decision-making criteria we can really get to here. We're going to have to close this off as lost, and come back to me when you're ready. But we're going to
put them in leads queue, right? Put them back in the marketing bucket and nurture them, provide them with value-added content, and then inevitably an event will occur, and you'll have another opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
You always have 2 or 3 shots. So.
Absolutely, and actually, the quicker you fail, the quicker we can move on. And one of the interesting data points. So, as I say, first of all, top performers closing 30% of their opportunities off at that discovery stage and being really bullish about it. The other really interesting data point, we know that relationships drive revenue. And so when you're monitoring the momentum with those relationships, if you're running a complex sales process and you're multi-threaded and the engagement's relatively high, if you start to see that engagement drop off, if people stop turning up to your meetings, they start returning to your calls or your emails, that's a really good indicator this deal's on track to start to slip and then ultimately close lost. And I don't know if you've got any view on that, but from what we're seeing, when you start seeing deals slip, the win rates drop pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. In my history, there's two things that I've lost to in selling, and it just really globally. One, I've lost to happy ears. You can't sell to somebody that can't buy.
Yeah.
You just can't, right? And then secondarily, status quo, doing nothing. So and usually they're interrelated. Like usually the person who doesn't want to do anything is because they can't. And they just don't have the willpower to assemble a cast of characters to, approve, fund, and implement a solution, whatever it may be. They just don't have the juice, right? And they, quite frankly, maybe you could turn them into a champion by figuring out how they get paid and make it a personal win and tie it to your tech. That's a strategy, but it's usually you're selling to someone that can't buy. And someone gets somebody to finally respond to an email or a LinkedIn, or they finally get somebody to pick up their phone, and post-COVID, nobody even has a desk anymore, they finally get them to answer. Well, they don't want to kill it, right? Because they have something to talk about in the pipeline call versus just saying, hey, listen, I'm struggling. Can you coach me up on sort of top of funnel? I need different pipeline tips and tricks to get some new players, new actors in my pipeline, because this movie's not playing out the way I want. I'd rather have that conversation than get it all the way to June 30th. It's going to close. It's going to close. It's going to close. It's going to close. That's why I love about being a frontline sales leader, is because I can never get buffaloed, because I'm so engaged with the customer that I already know what's going to happen. You can tell me what's going to happen, but I want to tell you what's going to happen.
Yeah,
and
it's
the great thing about being frontline. It's the bad thing about being one removed.
No, I totally buy into it, and I love that. I've just made a note on that you can't sell to someone who can't buy. So I love that. I think that's a great takeaway for me at least. But so when you joined the business that you're in at the moment, where were they at from a kind of forecast accuracy and process perspective, and what journey did you take them through? How have they become more kind of predictable?
Yeah, so we were living on contract revenue. So if you looked at us as an organization, you look at flight operations, that would go into a PS bucket, right? So we weren't even on a journey to valuation. There was a $3 million IP spin out from the parent that was and is Accelerate, our platform. So we elected immediately that we have to monetize this. We need to get fingers on keyboards. We need ARR to build our story, right? To build our valuation story. So we were no revenue. We were doing contract flight operations for growers and for the state of Michigan. And so we grew that. We found out who the cohorts were going to be that would invest in a platform like Accelerate. We modeled data. We built models. We built proof of concepts, and then we went to market, right? So product market fit happened pretty quickly.
Wow.
And then it was off to the races, right? In very tough times. It wasn't. I'm grateful for the team that I had around me. I still have no desire to write federal grants for non-diluted funding. But other people can do that, right? So it was a business that you wouldn't recognize now. Like from there to now, it's two completely different entities altogether.
So you built a whole go-to-market strategy from the ground up in a very short amount of time. And is it predictable yet? Are you at the point where market fits there, and you can kind of that if you've got this at the top of the funnel, you can see what the numbers are looking like, or is it still a work in progress?
Yeah, the predictability of it is it's a backwards model. So if you look at traditional SaaS, right, you go and you sell a license. Your PS revenue is going to be implementation almost always, right? You're going to have some implementation hit, particularly if it's touching other systems in any way, shape, or form that are core to the operation of the business. So you're going to have some PS revenue there, but it's not services revenue, right? The way that we look at it is our services comes before the sale of software. We know if we get a contract flight operation, whether it be with a food manufacturer, whether it be with a state and local government, whomever it may be, NASA, for example, and we conduct flight operations. we know there's going to be fingers on the keyboard of the software because that's where it lives.
Yeah.
That's where the data lives.
Yeah.
So if you want access to the data, you're going to have to buy a subscription. And it's site-based. It's not per user per year. We did it site-based because there's not going to be enough fingers on the keyboards to make it like a Salesforce or, a HubSpot, right? It's not that.
Understood. Okay. We talked earlier a little bit about, before we jumped in here, about Challenger. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've kind of adopted that and used it in your career, and in particular where you are now?
Yes. I mean, I'm ancient. So, I started, I think it was with Tom Freese's question-based selling and Neil Rackman's spin selling. That's how old I am. And so we started there. And then of course, Mike Bosworth came around and wrote a little book called Solution Selling. And so we all adopted that, right? And then the Challenger was sort of the better looking cousin of solution selling, right?
Okay.
That sort of built on that, the platform. Where Challenger is different is it takes away sort of discovery first mentality, right? When you go in, you don't position what you do, you teach, right? So this semblance of commercial teaching, I was drawn to it. I was like, okay, this is a different way to sell. If I go in and I teach that individual something about their business that they didn't know before they met me, I'm going to be a person of credibility. They're going to lean on me to give them industry insight, maybe even talk about a competitor, not in a negative light, but tell them where their strengths are and where they play and why we're different. You have to make yourself equal before you can make yourself different. You have to make yourself equal before you can't. You go in and you make yourself different before you make yourself equal, you're done. You're out. Your credibility shot. So then, beginning to tailor what was taught and what was inherited as content value, and then commercializing that into your offering, and then taking control. Taking control is building the necessary cast of characters to get an enterprise level deal done, which can take a lot of time, and do your value mapping and your persona mapping and who's positive, who's negative, who's neutral, and begin to build out your account-based selling. So your Challenger then leads into ABM, right? Yep. What your head of marketing, I'm sure, does. And you get into, if you try to be everything to everyone, you have no focus. So I'm a firm believer in the leverage of the Challenger in the marketing charter. And companies that have adopted the Challenger successfully don't just adopt it in sales. They adopt it in engineering. They adopt it in marketing. They adopt it in product, right? Not to the degree that sellers do, but we're all speaking the same language. That's why Medic is so great, because when we talk about a deal, we're all speaking the same language. So there's no guessing. There's no mystery. But the Challenger sort of is that nucleus in my mind, and everything sort of orbits around it, right? So I look at the Challenger as the sun, and Medic sort of as Venus or whatever, Earth, and sort of rotating around. But the core nucleus is definitely the Challenger, because people, and I hate, people buy from people. I hate that, but it's true. It's true. Yeah. People buy from people. And I've seen, and no offense to salespeople I've managed over thousands of reps over 28 years. And I've had some amazing sellers that I learned a bunch from. But then there's others that they just never got it. They were never a trusted resource for their customers. Picked up a few deals now and then, no predictability in their business. They struggled, and then they ended up falling out, right? This is a bottom third business. It's not personal, it's business, right? It's a bottom third world we live in, and there's lots of different jobs you can do, and there's different companies maybe you're a better fit for. But if you're bottom 33%, you're always on a PIP. Even if you're not on a PIP, you're on a PIP, right?
Yeah.
It just is what it is. But leveraging things like the Challenger, you can make an average rep great.
Yeah,
you can
I
make
agree.
Great.
Are there particular books that you recommend to your sales team when they come on board? Is there a journey of kind of onboarding that you take them through, or do you train it yourselves, or do you use a third party?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in Stoicism. So I introduce new sellers to Seneca and Marcus Aurelius and some of the older philosophers, and introduce them into this practice of Stoicism. It's just this is a very hard job. I think it's probably the hardest job out there. It's the most insecure. Reps are given us, basically a draw on the guise of a salary. They're leased out a subset of accounts, and they're given a finite window of time to extrapolate revenue from said accounts, or they're gone. And that's a very tough thing to swallow, but it is what it is, right? So dealing with things as they come, being able to get all the noise out. I also introduced them to Satguru, who's a guru that I follow. So I introduced them to meditation and breathing, and this is a very tough job. I call sellers athletes, right? And I mean that. Like, you have to take care of your mind and you have to take care of your body to do this job. So there's that element of it. And that's everything from nutrition to exercise to meditation, whatever it may be. Then there's, the practice of selling, right? It's 50% art, 50% science. What do we bring in? Again, challenger at the nucleus. And I do like introducing them some of the old school sales methodologies that they can sort of laugh at and be like, oh, we've come a long way. I'm glad that we use the challenger instead of Neil Rackman's spin selling. No offense to Neil, he's a great guy. So is Tom Priest. They're both great guys, and they made millions of dollars selling software. So no rub on them.
No, absolutely. Listen, so many takeaways from today's session. I've written half a page of notes, so I really appreciate your contribution today.
I appreciate you having me. It was a joyful conversation. I always like talking to other industry leads. And you're in a space of high demand, and it sounds like y'all have a very interesting value proposition and some inherited value. And I wish you all the best of luck with your growth journey. And as I walk towards exit, I'll have one eye on you guys and seeing how y'all are doing.
Oh, I appreciate that, and I'll keep an eye on kind of your progress as well. And people can find you on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, yep. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty active on there. I think it's a great platform. Another opportunity to capture massive amounts of input data and make it useful.
Agreed. Well,
so
with your blessing, we'll include a link to your LinkedIn in our
Perfect.
notes as well, so people can reach out to you directly through that as well. And I really enjoyed today's session. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Me as well.
And good luck with your journey and hopefully the exit on its way. So thanks again for contributing. And
Appreciate it.
Namaste. Thank you for the session.